Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Today's story proves that sometimes karma doesn't need a boarding pass. It just needs a little Wi-Fi and a good memory for spoilers. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Karen on a plane. This happened back in June, but I just told the story to some friends last night and they unanimously agreed it deserved a wider audience. So here it is. On June 26th, I had a 2-hour flight booked, and being a tall person, I made sure to grab a seat in the emergency row for the extra legroom. It's not luxurious, but it's enough to keep my knees from being crushed for the duration. I had a window seat, and when I boarded, I noticed that the woman sitting in the aisle seat had already made herself very comfortable. She'd stored not only her own carry-ons under her seat, but had shoved a bunch of her stuff under mine too. I asked her politely if she could move her belongings so I could have the foot space I paid for. She barely acknowledged me, grumbling something unintelligible and refusing to move them. So I flagged down a flight attendant. The FA came over and informed her that she couldn't store items under another passenger seat and she needed to move them immediately. Grudgingly, the woman pulled her stuff out from under my seat, but just dumped it all in the aisle without properly stowing it. Right before takeoff, the FA came by again and noticed her bags just lying there. She told her firmly that the bags had to go in the overhead bins, no exceptions. The woman refused again until she was threatened with being kicked off the plane. With more mutterings and glares in my direction, she finally complied and shoved her bags overhead. As she did, she called me a B under her breath. Loud enough for me to hear, of course. I thought that would be the end of it. Oh, how wrong I was. For the next 2 hours, she decided to make my life miserable in the pettiest way possible. She must have gotten up no less than 13 times. Yes, I counted, to stretch, smirk at me, and dramatically sit back down. Every 8 to 10 minutes like clockwork. Up, aisle stretch, passive-aggressive glance, plop down. I was trying to work on my laptop, and her constant movements were making it nearly impossible. Around her 8th time getting up, I realized I'd had enough. Inspiration struck, and I noticed she was deeply engrossed in a book during the few moments she was seated. So I pulled out my phone, paid the $11.30 for the in-flight Wi-Fi, and logged on to Goodreads. I looked up the exact book she was reading and found detailed spoilers, including the ending and major twists. I smiled to myself and waited for my opportunity. When we began our descent, I decided it was time for my revenge. I called the flight attendant over and calmly let her know that I would need assistance disembarking. This meant that I would stay seated until everyone else had exited the plane. The woman next to me immediately started grumbling under her breath again. I turned to her with the same fake sweet smirk she'd given me all flight long. As the plane landed and rows began clearing out, she kept shifting impatiently in her seat. When finally everyone else had left and I slowly stood up to grab my things, I knew it was time to deliver the finishing blow. As I passed into the business class section, I turned around, looked her square in the eye, and spoiled the major plot twist and the ending of the book she was reading in vivid detail. Her face crumpled into pure rage and disbelief. I finished with a bright, chipper, "Have a great day," and strolled off the plane without a care in the world. Sometimes petty justice is the most satisfying kind. I can't fathom the sense of entitlement people must hold to put their things in someone else's seat space, and then the audacity to be upset when made to move it. And our second story. Crazy woman in Walmart. This happened a while ago, but I still think about it sometimes because it was truly my first real encounter with a wild Karen. At the time, I was working as a server at a restaurant right across the street from my local Walmart. On this particular day, my manager asked me to stop by Walmart before my shift and pick up a basket or storage container for the restaurant office. No big deal. I had a little extra time before work, so I agreed. When I got there, I was still in my full work uniform, black pants, a black t-shirt, black kitchen shoes, and my black server apron. Literally nothing about me looked like I worked at Walmart, where employees wear blue vests and khakis. But apparently, uniforms are a mystery to some people. I was in the home goods aisle browsing around for baskets when this woman came up to me. "Karen, hey, can you tell me where the alarm clocks are?" I looked up and tried to be polite. Me, oh, I'm not sure, but they should be nearby since we're in the home goods area. Maybe check the next aisle over? I turned back to looking through baskets, thinking that would be the end of it. Nope. Karen, why don't you look it up for me? I was a little taken aback, but still tried to stay polite. Me, sorry, I don't have any cell service in here, but I'm sure someone else who works here can help you. At this point, most reasonable people would realize I wasn't an employee, but not Karen. Karen, do you have a problem helping a customer find an item? Me, oh no, I'm sorry, I don't actually work here. I gesture at my apron and serving outfit, still trying to stay calm. Karen narrowed her eyes at me like she didn't believe a word I was saying. Karen, I think you do work here and you just don't want to help me. Show me where the alarm clocks are. Me, ma'am, again, I'm sorry, but I don't work here. I work at the restaurant across the street, and I'm just trying to grab something quick before my shift. And then, of course, came the explosion. Karen screaming, "You are at work! Go get your manager right now!" Me, shocked, no. You're welcome to find a Walmart employee yourself, but I really don't have time for this. Karen, I'm gonna call corporate and tell them you're refusing to service a customer. How would you like that? Me, go right ahead. At this point, I just grabbed a basket and started walking away. Karen, still shrieking behind me, "Get me your manager! Don't you walk away from me!" Me, turning briefly, I am a server at a restaurant. I do not work here. And with that, I kept moving. She actually followed me all the way to the front of the store, ranting the entire time like a toddler who'd been denied a lollipop. When I got to the self-checkout to pay for my items, I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the end of it. Of course not. She marched up to the self-checkout attendant, who thankfully also happened to be a manager, and started her tirade. Karen, I need to report an unprofessional employee. Points at me dramatically. SCO manager, deadpan. That person doesn't work here. They're wearing a restaurant uniform and apron. The silence that followed was beautiful. Karen's face contorted like she'd just bitten into a lemon. She sputtered for a second before doubling down. Karen yelling across the checkout lanes, "What's your manager's name at the restaurant? I'm still reporting you." I just smiled, ignored her, finished paying for my stuff, grabbed my bag, and walked out of the store without another word. When I got to work, I immediately told everyone the story, and they all cracked up. My manager, bless her, said if Karen somehow managed to find the restaurant's number and tried to complain, she'd already know the real story, and there was no way I'd be in trouble. Honestly, it was so absurd it barely even made me mad. It was just surreal. I'll never forget that my first encounter with a Karen involved being accused of working at Walmart while literally wearing a black apron with a giant restaurant logo on it. My fantasy? Answer her thusly. What's the name of the mental facility you're in? They need to know you got out. What? How dare you? I'm not in a mental facility. Quit lying to me. You clearly can't tell the difference between customers and employees. What's the name of your doctor? And our last story. HOA thought they could bully me. A few years ago, I bought a house in a brand new development. It was exciting. New roads, new construction, new everything. I was actually the first one to move in. At the time, there was no HOA, and one of the major selling points was that the builder put it in writing. Early buyers like me would be grandfathered in if an HOA ever got established later. Basically, we were exempt from any HOA rules or regulations that might come along after we closed. You'd think that would be the end of it. After all, a legally binding document should be enough, right? Yeah, not in this neighborhood. Fast forward a year or two, and enough homes were finished that the other residents voted to form an HOA. I wasn't worried at first. After all, my exemption was clear in my contract. But not long after the HOA was officially formed, the notices started rolling in. At first, it was petty stuff. A warning letter for receiving Amazon packages on Sundays. Apparently, Sunday deliveries somehow disrupt the peace. A reminder that cutting my grass after 6 p.m. could violate community quiet hours. Even a passive-aggressive note about parking my extra truck in my own expanded yard. Now, let me be clear. I bought an adjacent tract of land when I purchased my home. I legally own that additional space, and it's zoned residential, just like my house. I'm not squeezing a semi-truck into a tiny driveway. I just have a perfectly normal pickup parked on my extra property. But the HOA didn't care about those details. They saw something they didn't like and decided it must be against their rules, even if their rules didn't actually apply to me. Things came to a head when they turned their sights on my garage area. See, I run a small hobby woodworking business out of my garage. Nothing industrial, just personal projects, some custom furniture for friends, the occasional commission if I have time. I've got a few treated boards neatly stacked on a lumber rack outside the garage. It's organized and completely on my property. Honestly, you can barely see it from the road unless you're craning your neck. But sure enough, I got a notice labeling it an eyesore and demanding I remove the unsightly construction materials. That was the final straw. The HOA representatives, 3 of them actually, came to my door and tried to hand me a ticket for non-compliance. They rattled off a list of complaints, moved the woodpile, stopped receiving deliveries on Sundays, relocate my truck. They were acting like I was running a junkyard out of my garage, not storing a few boards for a table project. I listened patiently, then calmly ripped the ticket in half right in front of them and dropped it in my trash can. "Unless you have a court order, get off my property," I said. They looked stunned for a second. Then one of them, let's call him the HOA president, since he loved throwing that title around, called me an a-hole and said they'd be back with more official action. Good luck with that, buddy. The moment they walked off my property, I called a real estate lawyer. I explained the situation, sent him copies of my purchase contract, and asked him to review everything. He got back to me the next day and confirmed my exemption from the HOA was rock solid. They couldn't find me. They couldn't enforce their rules. If they kept harassing me, I had every right to send them a cease and desist, and if they trespassed again, I could file charges. So I installed security cameras around my property, high-quality, motion-activated ones with full cloud backup. If they so much as step 1 foot onto my land again without permission, I'll have all the evidence I need to drag them into court. And just for fun, I printed a large copy of my exemption clause and framed it inside my front hallway, so if they ever do come knocking again, I can just point to it. After talking to a few other early buyers, it turns out several of us were grandfathered in. We've started quietly coordinating. If the HOA keeps pushing, they're going to find themselves facing multiple lawsuits from homeowners they have zero authority over. You're basically living out the suburban version of "you have no power here." If this escalates further, and let's be real, people like that rarely give up gracefully, I'd love to hear how it goes, because something tells me you're going to keep winning. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.